Okay, so today we are going to be talking about my thoughts on book 7 of the Wheel of Time series. I finished this last night, so once again, we're just going to be chatting about just kind of unpacking my feelings. It's not going to be a really organized review. Okay, let's go. So I'm officially in the slog, and I respectfully disagree with the general consensus that the slog starts at book 7. I think that it started in book 6. I really struggled through book 6. I have a review. I'll just link the Wheel of Time playlist for all the reviews I've done up to this point. But I felt like book 6 was tough to get through until that final sequence that was amazing. But most of book 6 was a struggle. And so I dove into I actually took a month off between book 6 and book 7. And so when I got into book 7, I was excited to enter the Wheel of Time world again. But we started out with my favorite character, Perrin, but we started out by making him the most boring character in the daggum series suddenly. He went from being this powerful, incredible leader that has had probably the coolest character arc up to this point in the series. We've had him as this amazing guy that's grown and accepted the abilities that have been thrust upon him and risen into such a cool character. And then we started book 7 with him, and I was so excited because he's my favorite character, and he was absent in book 6. And suddenly, I don't know, does Jordan hate him all of a sudden? Like, suddenly he's the most boring character to follow. He's doing nothing and just worrying about his jealous wife, which has also been done dirty. Vail could have potentially been a really interesting character, but she's not anymore. I really, really loved Rand in this book, and as well as Rand and Min. So I've mentioned this in my other reviews, but Min is my favorite of Rand's many love interests. I do not like the dynamics of this at the moment. In the last book, the ladies basically decided we all like Rand, or rather love Rand, so we're just going to share him, and they didn't think to check with Rand. They just decided that this was the way it was going to be. I don't like the relationships in this series between men and women in general. I think that men and women treat each other terribly in this series, and I don't like the way the power dynamics work. I don't like the way men and women view each other, talk about each other, speak to each other, and I really don't like this relationship dynamic where the women have decided we're going to share this man, and then they don't check with him. They just tell him how it's going to. I don't like it. I understand that it makes sense in context to the world, but I don't enjoy the way this works. So much fantasy has such a power dynamic between men and women where the men are the ones in power and the women have no agency. And Robert Jordan is doing the opposite here, where the women have all the power and the men, at least in this series, have agency. At least there's that. But I still don't like it. Why can't we just have a world where there's some equality? Doing the opposite isn't better. I know a lot of people don't have problems with the power dynamics, but also a lot of people do. Whatever, it's my review. I'm gonna say how I feel. Regardless, all that being said, of all of Rand's many love interests, Min has been my favorite from the beginning, and I really liked seeing them in this book as well. Rand was such an interesting character to follow in this book. I'm loving watching him slowly digress into madness as he's speaking to the voice inside of his head at Luce Theron, as he's trying to work through his magic, and it seems like he's slowly being corrupted by power, but at the same time slowly being driven, I don't want to say driven mad, a little bit of driven mad and a lot of PTSD, like that scene when they were in the council meeting and it was very close quarters and he had a panic attack. I mean, he lost it after being captured and held in captivity in that box for so much time in book 6. Now being in a close quarter, he just can't handle it. He just loses it. I really appreciate that because Rand really started out as a bland character. In my first couple of book reviews, I was calling him Rand the Bland, and he has become so much more interesting between the internal struggles that he's having and the way he's handling his rise to power. He's finally accepted his position, but he's almost swinging too far. As well as when Rand and Min had sex in this book, and he essentially it's consensual, and then he's terrified that he raped her and thinks that he raped her, and she has to assure him that she didn't, but he has these insecurities where he just thinks there's no way anyone would want me, so it must have not been consensual. Just Rand's entire dynamic is really interesting at this point. He's gaining so much power, but he's also becoming so unhinged and not sure. He wants to embrace the power, but he's not sure how to handle the power, and he's dealing with all this PTSD. There's just so many layers, so many conflicting parts about Rand, and he's becoming a character that I'm really enjoying watching, and I really have no idea where his development is taking him. Although I will say he's now gotten to the point where he has so much power that something has to happen to knock his power down. I don't know what it is that's going to happen to knock Rand down, but he has to be, because we're only halfway through the series, and so whenever we get to the final climax, the final battles, and that Rand, if he continues on this trajectory, there's not really going to be a battle. He's going to be so powerful that there really won't be a foe that could even slightly be considered a fair match to him. So I'm really curious about that as well. Is it that he's going to be driven so insane that he's going to lose his abilities? Or I don't know. I'm very curious about where he's gonna take us. Mat is slowly becoming more interesting as well. Mat's a character that in book 1, I loved him, and then he lost it. Like he became not possessed, but very influenced by that dagger. And he was interesting at that point too. But then when the dagger was out of the picture and he just became mad again, he got really boring to me. And now he's slowly gaining power and becoming one of the most powerful people in the series, but still, I really haven't fallen in love with him again yet. He's still just kind of a character, but this is the first book where I'm starting to see, okay, Mat's cool. Mat's becoming a character that's starting to stand out to me, and I see why he's such a fandom favorite, it seems. Although I will say that Mat is becoming a joke to me. It seems like in every single book, Mat almost dies. Something happens, he gets hanged, a wall falls on him, something happens that if this weren't so repetitive, I would be terrified for his life. Actually, the first 3 times it happened, I was tricked and I actually thought that he was gonna die, but I think Mat's immortal. I don't think Mat can die. Things keep happening that makes it look like he's gonna die, and then he doesn't. And now it just makes me laugh. It's when Mat looks dead, I just chuckle because I know he's not. I know he never will be. That would be a great surprise if Jordan actually killed him at some point, because at this point, I don't think it can happen. That said, with Mat's dynamic in this book, it was really cool to see him with Brigida. He's such a ladies' man. He's always after them ladies, that to see him just in the bar having a drink with a friend, Brigida, was really enjoyable to watch. Of course, it was pretty funny when, I think was it Elaine and Egwene that Brigida went after and forced them to apologize. No, Nynaeve was in on it too, right? Anyway, she forced them to apologize, and then that whole apology scene was ridiculous and hilarious. And then Mat doesn't even care. I don't know if that was part of him just kind of trying to get back at them, like, your apology doesn't matter to me. After you put all this effort into your apology doesn't matter to me. Or if it was more like he just genuinely didn't mind. But that whole scene was great. What I didn't love about Mat's story this time was the whole thing when he got raped at knife point. I do appreciate that Jordan doesn't feel any need to draw out every detail of what a rape looks like in his books, while still plainly making clear what just happened. But it was, once again, the way these women react to things is rough to read. Because when Mat talks about the rape, the women laugh at him and essentially say, you're a ladies' man, you're fine. It was essentially a, you were probably asking for it sort of reaction, which didn't love, but that's just characters reacting. That just makes me not like those characters more. But then the way Mat almost went into this Stockholm sort of reaction where he then is like, but I'll be chasing you next time. I don't I don't know if that's going to turn into something, if Matt and if they're going to turn into a relationship, and it's supposed to somehow become a romantic thing, or if this is going to be some sort of trauma that now Matt deals with in the future books. I'm curious to see how that plays out, or if it's just going to be dropped at this point. But I didn't love the way that all was handled at all. Oh, right. And then there was that scene where Mogaine, is that how you say that? Mogideon, where Mogideon balefires the boat that Nynaeve is on. I actually thought we were losing Nynaeve there, which would have surprised me because she hasn't really had any character growth up to this point. So I would have been really surprised if we killed her off at this point. But no, pigeons save her. That was actually really funny. It didn't, that convenience or whatever you want to call it, didn't bother me because once again, I just thought it was funny. Speaking of Nynaeve, Lan is back. And he's barely he barely gets any lines, which is a bummer because he's barely had any lines in this entire series. And he's one character that has really stood out to me in this series the entire time. And yet he's just barely been existent, but he's back. He only has a couple of lines. He marries Nynaeve finally, and I didn't read New Springs. I guess I'm gonna read it at the end after I've read all 14 books. I didn't want to take a break, but I do know that we get more depth into their relationship in New Springs, so I've missed that. But I've enjoyed Nynaeve and Lan from the beginning. I feel like they're one of the only relationships in the series where it actually seems like there was some buildup and there was some chemistry between them. It seems like up to this point, almost every relationship, it's just that suddenly someone's in love with someone. There's really hardly any buildup at all. And then someone's like, but I love Rand. And I never know where it's coming from. But with Nynaeve and Lan, I actually felt some chemistry between them. So I was really happy to see them together in this book. And I hope that we finally actually get something out of Lan now. I hope that he becomes an instrumental character in the series because he's one of the most interesting characters and he gets no page time. So maybe now we'll get that out of him. Another really interesting scene was when they went for the, what's it called? Bowl of the Winds and the Golem? Is that how you say it? I want to pronounce it Gollum, like the myth of the Golem. But maybe that's not. Anyway, the Golem interrupts them and becomes a blockade for them. And oh my goodness, it was such an interesting character. He essentially can't be hurt, or at least it's very difficult to hurt him. A lot of things don't affect him. And I loved that. Man, I hope we get more of that. I hope this isn't just some throwaway creature that we see one time. I hope that comes into play a lot in the series to come because that was a creature that I had so much fun with that scene. Another really interesting scene was the Sanchan invasion, is maybe how you say that name. I really liked that as well because, again, Jordan, his battle sequences, anything that he has that's high action, I really like the way he handles those scenes. But I was also really happy because the Sanchan were mentioned. I don't even remember what book, but they were built up in one of the early books to be these big, great foes. And then I had pretty much forgotten about them. When they showed up on the scene, I had to take a minute to think, now who are these guys? Because they were built up in an early book and then they just disappeared. So to have them back was really satisfying because we got to see them truly be very intimidating. And it was a really satisfying scene. Oh, right. And then Rand at one point was stabbed by Podon Thane. Is that how you say that? And then his two scars, I don't know, they came together and they were fighting each other. It was, I don't even know what was happening, but I loved the way Jordan described it. It was gross and it was interesting, and I guess the different magics in the different scars were battling it out within him, and I loved it. Then you have guys, I don't know how to say any of these names. I'm just gonna say Samael because who knows. But he was killed, and Rand apparently has forgotten that he's in a fantasy novel and no body means no death. So he's convinced that he's dead, but I am not because this isn't my first rodeo. So I'm waiting for him to come back. I'm also still waiting for Lanfear. I'm still waiting for Lanfear to come back too. Please tell me Lanfear comes back. Don't actually tell me. I don't want spoilers. But please tell me Lanfear actually comes back, because I've been waiting for her to come back for so long. I don't remember if there was no body for her or not, but there definitely wasn't for Samael, or however you say his name. So he's coming back. And then this is the point where we get to where I feel like Rand is starting to really become corrupted by the power, is when he essentially just takes the crown and puts it on his own head. He has clearly moved from the scared farm boy who doesn't want to be the chosen one to taking power for himself. And again, I just find his dynamic so interesting. Now that Perrin has been thrown under the bus and apparently Jordan doesn't like him anymore, Rand is starting to stand out as one of the most interesting characters to follow, because he's there's so many layers to him, and I just have no idea where his character arc is going. I feel like I can see an arc for most of these characters, and I can have a general idea of what Jordan plans to do with them, but with Rand, I have no clue. I have no guesses. So I guess I'll just spend a moment acknowledging some of the stuff that I've acknowledged in previous videos, but the things that kind of made this feel more like a slog to me. I've mentioned this before, but just in general, I know that Jordan is trying to remind the reader of everything that they may have forgotten in between publication dates of these books. But I do think that he overdoes it with his repetitiveness, with reminding us over and over again about the magic and about the world and about where the characters have come from, to the point where at this point, the last probably 3 books could have all been about half the size that they were if we just had a summary at the beginning of the book, or if he just didn't overdo his recaps and his reminders of how the magic works and everything so much. Another thing that I think I mentioned in my last review, but I want to mention again because it's such a bummer, is Jordan has such a massive cast of characters and a huge cast of characters that are genuinely important to the story. And I'm so bummed because I don't feel like Jordan does the best job at balancing them. I think that's one thing that he misses, because we have entire books where characters just don't even get mentioned or hardly get mentioned. We have characters that are built up and then they just disappear. And I just don't think that there's a great balance for all these characters. And it makes it feel frustrating, especially when you like certain characters' arcs more than others, or certain characters' storylines more than others. I wish there was a better balance, or that the cast was a little bit more condensed so that it could be balanced better. And kind of going off of that are the characters that have become essentially nothing. They've become essentially pointless. Loyal is one character that really stands out to me in this. Loyal was a character that I loved in the first book or 2 that he was in. He came off as such a sweetheart and intellectual and such a very interesting character, but he really hasn't had any growth or depth given to him from the very beginning. Like, he started out as an interesting character and then he's stayed on that same note. And Jordan is so good at character arcs, but there are certain characters that he just doesn't give an arc to, or at least hasn't yet. And Loyal is one of those characters. Lan is one of those characters. Tom really hasn't had any growth either for a while. And there are characters that have, it seems like they're given a purpose and then they're just not given any more attention after that. After they've served their purpose, they just sort of exist in the world, but they don't get any more depth or growth or intentionality. And that's a bummer for me, because a lot of these characters are characters that I'm genuinely interested in, and I would like to see them get the amount of attention that some of the other characters are, but it seems like they've just been dropped off, and they could be killed off and the story would be the same. And I'm sad about that. A lot of people quit the series at this point. When they're in the slog, people give up and they don't get through to the supposedly incredible ending that the Wheel of Time ends on. And I don't want that. I loved the first 5 books and the ending sequence of book 6. It was, like, the beginning of the series was so good. And I'm starting to get to the point where I'm not enjoying reading them as much, and I don't want to give up. I want to see it through to the end. So what I decided, what I have determined for myself is on this read through, my first read through, I'm going to allow myself to do some skimming during the really repetitive parts or the parts where it doesn't seem like anything is happening, even though I know stuff is happening, just very minor things that you have to really pay attention to pick up on. It doesn't feel like anything's happening to me with no context to where the series is going. And so I've decided to allow myself permission to skim those sections and just pay attention to when things are really going down on my first read through. And then if the way the series ends, if I fall in love with the series and I decide to do a reread someday, then that's when I'll really read these books, these slog books thoroughly. So I think that's kind of all I had to say about book 7. I have pretty mixed feelings about it. Once again, I guess I have the same feelings as book 6, except that I don't think book 7 had quite the climax that book 6 did. But I do have similar feelings in that there were so many really cool scenes and there was a lot of really cool character growth with certain characters. But I have the same qualms that I've had in the last couple of books, and that's the over repetitiveness, too many pages for what we really need for the amount of story that's told, as well as I still don't like the dynamics between men and women, but I don't think that's going to change. I think that's just the world, and I just happen to not like this dynamic of this world, and I still don't like the way these characters are being balanced out. But that said, just because I do have some critical things to say about it, that doesn't change the fact that this world is incredible. These character arcs, the ones that do get arcs, these character arcs are awesome and so much fun to watch unfold. There are really interesting scenes still happening. So I just have such mixed feelings at this point in my read through of this series. There are things that I'm loving, but there are things that I'm disliking just as much as what I'm liking. So I'm starting to, it's just that the first several books I loved so much, and I'm starting to get the point where I don't really know how I feel about the series at the moment. I do have faith that it will end well, that Robert Jordan's last book and the books that Sanderson wrote to finish out the series, I do have faith that those will be incredible. But I am struggling, especially through books 6 and 7, and I'm expecting that to continue through the slog. But I'd love to continue to chat with you guys about this book and this series. Just don't spoil me for future books, please. But thanks so much for being so supportive and for being awesome to chat with as I've been reading through the series. And I'd love to chat with you more about it in the comments. I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and I post my reviews on off days. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.